The pain struck without warning. One moment I was lying in bed thinking about tomorrow's soccer practice, and the next my chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible force. I tried to call out to Mom, but my voice failed me. The last thing I remember was the sound of my body hitting the floor and my little sister Sarah's terrified scream. Emma. Mom's voice seemed to come from far away. Through my fading consciousness, I felt her hands on my face, heard Dad's heavy footsteps running up the stairs, and caught fragments of their panicked conversation. Call 911. She's not breathing properly. Please, God, not our baby. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and desperate prayers. Mom held my hand, her tears falling on my arm as she whispered the Lord's Prayer over and over. The paramedics worked frantically, their voices urgent but professional. I wanted to tell Mom I loved her, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The pain was overwhelming now, consuming everything. Then suddenly, in the emergency room, a strange peace washed over me. The doctor's shouts became distant echoes and the harsh hospital lights began to fade. I heard the terrible sound of a flatline, saw Mom collapse into Dad's arms, and watched as the medical team rushed to revive me. But I was no longer afraid. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. A warmth unlike anything I'd ever known enveloped me, and through the chaos I heard a voice gentle, loving, and somehow familiar, though I'd never heard it before. Be not afraid, little one. The voice carried such authority and love that every fear melted away. A soft golden light began to fill my vision, different from the harsh hospital fluorescence. It was like seeing sunrise and sunset at the same time, like being wrapped in pure love. As my earthly consciousness faded, I caught one last glimpse of my family, Mom being held back by nurses, Dad trying to stay strong but tears streaming down his face, Sarah sobbing in the hallway. I wanted to reach out to them, to tell them everything would be okay. The last thing I heard was the doctor calling my time of death. But I knew this wasn't the end. Somehow I knew it was just the beginning of something far more incredible than anyone could imagine. The golden light grew stronger, and I felt myself being drawn toward it, toward that loving voice that promised I had nothing to fear. If you find value in this story and want to hear more inspiring tales of faith and miracles, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us share these powerful messages of hope with others. Before everything changed, I was just a regular 12-year-old girl from a small town in Minnesota. Our family wasn't rich, but we were happy in our modest two-story house on Maple Street. Dad worked as an accountant at the local firm, and Mom taught 3rd grade at St. Mary's Elementary. My older brother Jacob was the star quarterback at high school, and my little sister Sarah was the family artist, always drawing pictures of angels and rainbows. I was the middle child, neither exceptional nor troublesome. At school, I maintained decent grades, played soccer, and had a small circle of close friends. Miss Thompson, my English teacher, always said I had a gift for storytelling, but I never thought much of it. I was just Emma Johnson ordinary in almost every way. Our family's faith was the cornerstone of our lives. Every Sunday we'd attend service at First Baptist Church, where Pastor David's sermons always seemed to speak directly to my heart. I loved the way sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, creating patterns of colored light that danced across the wooden pews. Sometimes I'd sit there after service just watching the dust motes float in the rainbow beams, feeling closer to God in those quiet moments than anywhere else. Mom always said I had an old soul. While other kids my age were obsessed with social media and the latest trends, I found joy in simpler things, helping Mom bake cookies for the church bake sale, reading to elderly residents at the nursing home where my aunt worked, or just sitting on our back porch watching butterflies in our small garden. There was something peaceful about those moments that filled my heart with contentment. Our house was always filled with music. Mom played piano at church, and she'd taught all of us the basics. In the evenings, we'd often gather around the old upright piano in our living room, singing hymns or popular songs. Those were the moments I treasured most, all of us together, our voices blending in harmony, while the smell of Mom's apple pie wafted from the kitchen. But looking back now, I realized there were signs that something extraordinary was coming. The dreams started about 6 months before that fateful night. They weren't scary exactly, but they were intense, filled with golden light and voices I couldn't quite understand. I never told anyone about them, not even Mom, who I usually told everything to. They felt too personal, too sacred somehow. Then there were the moments in church when I'd feel overwhelmed by a presence I couldn't explain. During worship, tears would roll down my face for no reason, and I'd feel this incredible love filling my chest until I thought it might burst. Pastor David noticed and once asked if I was okay. I just nodded, unable to explain what I was feeling. I also started having this strange urge to help people more than usual. I'd find myself drawn to kids at school who seemed sad or lonely. One day I gave my lunch to Tommy Wilson, the new kid who always sat alone. Another time I spent my birthday money buying groceries for Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor whose Social Security check hadn't arrived. These weren't things I thought about doing, they just felt right, like I was being guided by an invisible hand. My family noticed these changes too. Emma's going through her St. phase. Jacob would tease, but Mom would hush him with a look. She understood something was different about me, though I don't think any of us could have imagined just how different things would become. Life was simple then, predictable in its routines and rhythms. We said grace before meals, did our homework at the kitchen table, and never went to bed without hugging each other goodnight. Dad would read us Bible stories and Mom would tuck us in with a kiss and a prayer. It was a good life, a blessed life, though we didn't fully appreciate it at the time. None of us knew that God had chosen our ordinary family for something extraordinary. We couldn't have guessed that our little town would become the center of a controversy that would challenge people's faith and beliefs. Most of all, I had no idea that I, Emma Johnson, would soon become a messenger of hope and divine love in a world desperate for both. But God knew, and He was preparing me in His own gentle way for the journey that lay ahead. The signs became more noticeable as fall turned to winter. I started experiencing things I couldn't explain, moments that seemed to whisper of something greater approaching. One morning in October, I woke to find my bedroom filled with a sweet fragrance like lilies in bloom, though it was far too cold for flowers. Mom couldn't smell it, but it lingered around me all day. During Sunday school, while Miss Anderson taught about Moses and the burning bush, all the lights in the classroom flickered simultaneously. When they steadied, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a figure made of light standing in the corner. I blinked and it was gone, but the warmth it left behind stayed with me for hours. Nobody else seemed to notice anything unusual. My dreams became more vivid and frequent. In one recurring dream, I stood in a vast field of golden wheat that stretched endlessly in every direction. A voice would call my name, not my everyday name, but something deeper, as if it was calling to my very soul. Each time I tried to remember the words upon waking, they slipped away like water through my fingers, leaving only an echo of profound importance. At school, strange coincidences began piling up. I'd think of someone and they'd appear around the corner. I'd feel compelled to take a different route home, only to find someone who needed help. Once I insisted we leave church early, something I'd never done before, and we ended up helping a family whose car had broken down in the freezing cold. Dad called it intuition, but it felt like something more. The most striking incident happened during our Christmas concert at church. I was singing in the children's choir, and halfway through Silent Night I felt an overwhelming presence beside me. The music seemed to fade away, and I heard a crystal clear voice say, "Be ready, little one. Your time is coming." When I opened my eyes, several people in the congregation were staring at me, later saying they'd seen a bright light surrounding me during the song. My little sister Sarah started drawing pictures of me surrounded by golden light. When Mom asked her about them, she simply said, "That's how Emma looks now." Mommy, she drew dozens of these pictures, each one showing me with what looked like rays of sunlight emanating from my body. We still have those drawings tucked away in a box under my bed. The headaches began in January, not painful, exactly, but accompanied by a pressure that made everything look brighter, more intense. Colors seemed more vivid, and I could hear music in ordinary sounds, the wind in the trees, water running, even the hum of the refrigerator. During these episodes, I'd often find myself writing in my journal, my hand moving of its own accord, filling pages with words I didn't remember writing. One passage stands out: "The veil grows thin and love breaks through. What seems like ending is but a door." I wrote this the week before everything changed, though I didn't understand its meaning at the time. Looking back, it's clear God was preparing me, leaving breadcrumbs along the path I would soon travel. The final sign came the day before my heart stopped. During math class, everything suddenly went quiet. though I could see my teacher's lips moving and my classmates taking notes. In that moment of silence, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me, and I knew with absolute certainty that something miraculous was about to happen. I wasn't afraid, just filled with a quiet anticipation. That evening, as Mom tucked me in, I hugged her longer than usual. "Everything's going to change tomorrow," I whispered. She laughed softly, assuming I was talking about the science test I had coming up. But I meant something far more significant, though I didn't yet understand what. As I lay in bed that final normal night of my life, watching moonlight paint silver patterns on my ceiling, I felt both incredibly small and infinitely precious. The air seemed charged with possibility, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. I said my usual prayers, but added something new: "God, whatever you need me to do, I'm ready." I didn't know then that those would be the last words I spoke before my heart stopped beating. I couldn't have known that God had been orchestrating every detail, preparing me for a journey that would challenge not only my faith, but the faith of countless others. All I knew was that something extraordinary was coming, and somehow I was meant to be part of it. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed. The hospital chaos fell away, and I found myself floating in what I can only describe as liquid light. It wasn't like swimming or flying, it was as if I had become part of the light itself. The pain that had gripped my chest vanished, replaced by a peace so profound it made every happy moment of my life seem dim in comparison. I could still see my body below, surrounded by doctors and nurses working frantically to revive me. Mom was being held back by a nurse, her face streaked with tears as she screamed my name. Dad stood rigid with shock, one hand pressed against the observation window, the other clutching Sarah, who buried her face in his shirt. I wanted to tell them I was okay, that everything was fine, but I couldn't reach them anymore. The scene began to fade, like a photograph slowly losing its color, and I felt myself being drawn upward. The hospital ceiling simply ceased to exist, and I passed through into what seemed like another dimension of reality. The golden light that had been my constant companion in those final days now surrounded me completely, but it wasn't blinding. Instead, it felt like being embraced by pure love. That's when I heard the music, if you can call it music. It was unlike anything on earth, as if joy and peace and love had been transformed into sound. Every note seemed alive, each harmony telling a story of its own. The closest I can come to describing it is imagining 1,000,000 perfect voices singing in harmony, but even that falls short of its beauty. As I moved through this space of light and music, I began to notice other presences around me. They weren't exactly people as we think of them, but rather beings of light themselves. They radiated welcome and love, and though I couldn't see faces in the traditional sense, I knew they were smiling at me. One presence felt familiar, achingly so. It moved closer, and I recognized her immediately, my grandmother, who had passed away when I was just a baby. She appeared both as the young woman from Mom's old photographs and the wise grandmother I had never known, somehow existing as both at once. When she embraced me, it felt like coming home after a long journey. "My precious Emma," she said, though she wasn't speaking with words as we know them. Her thoughts flowed directly into my consciousness, carried on waves of love and understanding. "You've grown so beautiful, inside and out." I wanted to ask her so many questions, but before I could, she showed me something that took my breath away, though I wasn't actually breathing anymore. In an instant, I saw every moment she had been with me throughout my life, sitting beside me when I was sick, watching proudly at my school plays, comforting me when I was sad. She had never truly left. She had been my guardian angel all along. But then her expression, or rather her essence, grew serious. "There's something you need to know, dear one," she began, but before she could continue, everything around us seemed to pause. The music swelled to a crescendo, and the light grew even brighter, though I hadn't thought that possible. A new presence was approaching, one so magnificent that even the other beings of light seemed to bow in reverence. I felt my grandmother's gentle nudge encouraging me forward. My entire being trembled with anticipation and awe. I knew, with a certainty deeper than any I had ever known, that I was about to meet Jesus himself. The moment stretched into eternity as the light grew more intense, more personal, more loving. Every second felt like a lifetime, yet also like no time was passing at all. I was aware of tears streaming down my face, though I had no physical body to cry with. They were tears of joy, of wonder, of overwhelming love. This was what all those signs had been preparing me for. All those moments of inexplicable peace, those strange coincidences, those mysterious feelings, they had been leading me to this moment. As the presence drew nearer, I felt my soul expanding, making room for something far greater than myself. The beings of light around me began to sing a new song, one that seemed to make the very fabric of reality vibrate with its power and beauty. My grandmother's presence steady beside me, I took what felt like a step forward, though I had no feet to step with, ready to receive whatever message or mission awaited me. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of an experience that would change not only my life but the lives of countless others. In that moment, standing on the threshold of heaven itself, I was about to receive a message that would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about faith, love, and the power of divine purpose. The presence approached, and the light took form not as the paintings and statues had portrayed him, but as pure love given shape. Jesus stood before me, his essence both gentle and powerful, familiar yet otherworldly. His eyes held the depth of eternity, and when he smiled, I felt every moment of joy I'd ever experienced multiplied 1,000-fold. "Emma," he spoke, and my name in his voice sounded like a song. My precious child, the words weren't English or any earthly language, but I understood them in my soul. Each syllable carried layers of meaning that human language couldn't capture. "You have been chosen," he continued, "not because you are perfect, but because your heart has remained open to love." Images flashed through my mind, every small act of kindness I'd ever performed, every prayer I'd whispered, every time I'd chosen compassion over judgment. I saw them as he saw them, each one creating ripples of light that touched countless lives. Then he showed me something that made my soul weep. The world as he sees it. I saw millions of people walking in darkness, their hearts heavy with pain, doubt, and loneliness, but within each person burned a tiny flame, a spark of divine love waiting to be awakened. "They have forgotten who they are," he said, his voice filled with both sorrow and infinite compassion. "They have forgotten that they are loved. Your mission," he continued, "is to remind them. Not through grand gestures or mighty works, but through the simple power of love and truth." He touched my soul, and in that touch I felt his love for every person who had ever lived or would live. It was overwhelming, infinite, unconditional. He shared verses from Scripture, but they were alive in a way I'd never experienced before. "Let the little children come to me" became not just words, but a living truth I could feel. Perfect love casts out fear, transformed into an experience of perfect fearlessness that filled my entire being. But then he showed me something that made me tremble: the cost of this mission. I saw the skepticism I would face, the mockery, the threats. I saw my family struggling with the attention my story would bring. I saw dark moments of doubt and fear ahead. "The path will not be easy," he warned, "but you will never walk it alone." He revealed to me that my grandmother's presence in heaven held a tragic secret. Her death had been by her own hand, after years of battling depression that nobody had recognized. This truth would become important in my mission, helping others understand both the depth of human suffering and the height of divine mercy. "Your father," he said gently, "carries within him an illness that will soon be discovered." I saw glimpses of hospital rooms, of chemotherapy sessions, of my family gathering in prayer. Through this challenge, many will learn the true meaning of faith and healing. Then he showed me my little sister Sarah, and how she would face her own trial, a kidnapping that would test our family's faith to its limits. But through this darkness would come a powerful testimony of love's triumph over evil. The message he gave me was both simple and profound. Love is the answer to every question, the solution to every problem, the light in every darkness. But not abstract love, active, choosing, sacrificial love lived out day by day in the smallest of ways. He placed his hand over my heart, and I felt it fill with a love so intense it seemed impossible to contain. "This love will be your guide, your strength, and your message," he said. "When you return, you will face those who deny miracles, who mock faith, who choose darkness over light. Love them too, for they know not what they do." Finally, he gave me a warning: there will be those who try to use your story for their own gain, who will twist my message for their purposes. Stand firm in the truth, speak it in love, and trust that I am with you always. As his presence began to fade, I felt a moment of panic. How will I remember all this? How will I find the words? I asked. His smile held all the warmth of creation. "The words will come when needed. Simply keep your heart open and your spirit willing. I will do the rest." With a final blessing, he touched my forehead and I felt his message sealed within my soul. I knew I would be returning to my body soon, but I would never be the same. I had been given not just a message, but a mission to be a living testament to the reality of divine love in a world desperate for hope. As I felt myself being drawn back toward earth, his final words echoed in my spirit, "Remember, little one, love never fails." The return to my body felt like being plunged into ice water after basking in warm sunlight. Everything was harsh, loud, and painfully physical. The first thing I heard was the frantic beeping of monitors. Then a doctor's shocked voice, "We have a pulse." Mom's tears fell on my face as she leaned over me, her hands trembling as she stroked my hair. My baby girl," she kept whispering. Dad stood beside her, his strong frame shaking with sobs. Through my blurred vision, I could see Sarah peeking around the door frame, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. The medical team bustled around me, checking vital signs and expressing amazement at my recovery. 43 minutes, I heard one nurse whisper to another. She was gone for 43 minutes, but I hadn't been gone, I'd been more alive than ever before. When I tried to speak, my throat felt like sandpaper. Mom pressed a small ice chip to my lips, and the cold water was shocking after the warmth of heaven. "Jesus," I managed to whisper. I saw Jesus' mom and dad exchanged worried glances, probably thinking I was delirious. Those first few days in the hospital were the hardest. My body felt like a heavy, ill-fitting costume after the lightness of my spiritual form. Every movement was an effort, every breath a conscious choice. But harder still was carrying the weight of what I'd experienced, truth so profound it seemed impossible to express in human words. The doctors came with their tests and questions. They spoke of oxygen deprivation, hallucinations, and the effects of trauma on the brain. I listened politely, but inside I was laughing. How could they explain away the taste of heaven? How could medical terms capture the feeling of being embraced by pure love? The first time I tried to tell my story in full, it was to Pastor David. He sat quietly by my hospital bed, listening without interruption as I described the light, the music, my grandmother's presence, and Jesus' message. When I finished, there were tears in his eyes. "Emma," he said gently, "what you're describing, it's going to challenge a lot of people's beliefs. Are you ready for that?" I wasn't sure I was, but I knew I had to be. That very afternoon, I had my first test. Dr. Marshall, the neurologist, came to discuss my experience. He was kind but dismissive, explaining how the dying brain can create vivid hallucinations. As he spoke, I felt Jesus' love filling me, and I looked at the doctor with new eyes. Behind his professional certainty, I could see his pain, the patients he'd lost, the questions that kept him awake at night. "Dr. Marshall," I interrupted softly, "your brother Thomas forgives you." The doctor froze, his face draining of color. I continued, sharing details about his brother's suicide that I couldn't possibly have known, details Jesus had shown me. "He wants you to know it wasn't your fault." The doctor left my room quickly after that, but I saw him later in the hospital chapel, his shoulders shaking with sobs. It was the first of many such moments when the knowledge Jesus had given me would break through people's carefully constructed walls. My family struggled to adjust. Mom hovered constantly, worried I might disappear again. Dad spent hours in his study researching near-death experiences, trying to make sense of it all. Sarah drew picture after picture of me surrounded by light, somehow able to see what others couldn't. The hardest part was the new way I saw people. Jesus' love had changed my vision. I could see the pain people carried, the burdens they bore, the light waiting to be awakened within them. Sometimes it was overwhelming. Walking down the hospital corridor, I would be struck by waves of others' emotions: grief, fear, hope, love. One night, unable to sleep, I wrote in my journal, "How do you carry heaven in a human heart? How do you speak God's language with a human tongue?" The magnitude of my mission felt impossible, yet I knew I wouldn't have to do it alone. Jesus' promise echoed in my soul, "I am with you always." As I grew stronger physically, I began to understand that my real journey was just beginning. The miracle of my return was just the opening chapter in a story that would touch countless lives. But first, I had to learn how to live in this world again while carrying the reality of heaven within me. Little did I know that my next challenge would reveal an ability I never expected, one that would make my divine mission both more complex and more profound. I first noticed it during my final night in the hospital. As I lay awake, watching moonlight dance across the sterile walls, I saw her, a young woman in a hospital gown, standing at the foot of my bed. She wasn't alive, at least not in the way we usually think of being alive, but she wasn't exactly a ghost either. She was caught between worlds, her soul tethered by unfinished business. "Help me," she whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "My baby." I never got to hold her. The woman's form flickered like a candle flame, and I could feel her anguish as if it were my own. Jesus' love welled up inside me, and I knew what I had to do. "Your daughter is safe," I told her softly. "She's with the Williams family in Cedar Rapids. They named her Hope." Information flowed through me, knowledge I couldn't possibly have on my own. "She's loved and she knows about you. They keep your picture by her bed." The woman's face transformed with joy, her form growing brighter until she simply faded away, finally at peace. That was just the beginning. Once I left the hospital, I began seeing them everywhere, souls weighted down by grief, regret, or unfinished business. Each one needed something different, sometimes just a message of love, other times specific information that could bring peace to them or their living loved ones. Mom noticed I would sometimes stop mid-conversation, my attention drawn to something she couldn't see. "Emma, honey, what's wrong?" she'd ask, concern etching deeper lines around her eyes. I tried to explain, but how do you tell your mother you see souls in need of healing? How do you describe the weight of carrying others' pain while maintaining your own balance in the physical world? The most challenging encounter came at school. During lunch period, I saw a teenage boy sitting alone in the corner of the cafeteria. No one else seemed to notice him, and for good reason. He had died in that very room 20 years ago. "They think I did it on purpose," he told me, his voice heavy with decades of pain. "But it was an accident. The peanuts in the cookie, I didn't know." That revelation led to a long overdue healing for his family. When I shared his message with the school principal, it set off a chain of events that not only brought peace to his parents, but also led to stricter food allergy protocols in schools across the district. Each soul I helped seemed to create ripples of healing that extended far beyond the initial encounter. But the ability came with a price. The emotional weight was enormous, and sometimes I felt overwhelmed by the sheer number of souls seeking help. Jesus had warned me the path wouldn't be easy, but experiencing it was different from knowing about it. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, my heart aching from carrying so much of others' pain. Dad noticed I was struggling and tried to help in his practical way. He set up a schedule, insisting I take breaks and maintain normal activities. Even Jesus rested, he reminded me, quoting scripture about the importance of balance. He was right, of course, but how do you rest when you can see the suffering that others can't? The turning point came when my grandmother's spirit visited me. Unlike the other souls, she appeared as I had seen her in heaven, radiant and whole. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying that same celestial music I remembered, "you're not meant to heal everyone. You're meant to be a bridge showing them the way to healing through God's love." That visit changed how I approached my gift. Instead of trying to solve every problem, I learned to listen and guide, helping souls understand that they were loved and that healing was possible. Sometimes just acknowledging their pain was enough to help them move forward. Sarah, with her child's wisdom, seemed to understand better than anyone. She would often sit with me during these encounters, even though she couldn't see what I saw. "You're like a lighthouse, Emma," she said one day, helping lost boats find their way home. As I learned to balance this new ability with my regular life, I began to understand it was just one part of my larger mission. Every soul I helped was a living testimony to God's love and the reality of the afterlife. Each healing brought hope not just to the soul involved, but to everyone who heard about it. But even as I grew more comfortable with this gift, I had no idea it would soon play a crucial role in uncovering a truth that would shake our family to its core. Word of my experience began to spread beyond our small town, first through whispered conversations at church, then through social media posts from people I'd helped. A local newspaper reporter, Mary Anderson, wrote a thoughtful piece about my return to life and the inexplicable knowledge I seemed to possess. The article went viral, and suddenly our quiet life transformed into something entirely different. The first major confrontation came during a local TV interview. The host, David Carter, started friendly enough but quickly turned skeptical. "Emma," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes, "you expect us to believe that a 12-year-old girl died, met Jesus, and now sees souls?" Before I could answer, he began listing medical explanations for near-death experiences. I felt Jesus' love fill me as I looked at David. "Your sister Claire," I said quietly. "She's standing behind you right now." The color drained from his face. "She wants you to know that the argument you had the night before, her accident wasn't what caused it. She says you need to forgive yourself." The studio fell silent. David's hands trembled as he tried to maintain his professional composure. He had never publicly spoken about his sister's death or his guilt over their last conversation. The interview ended shortly after, but not before thousands of viewers witnessed this unexpected moment of truth. Letters and emails began pouring in. People traveled from other states to see me, each carrying their own burden of grief or doubt. Some nights our front lawn looked like a camping ground, filled with people hoping for a chance to talk with me. Mom and Dad had to set up a system, working with our church to manage the requests and protect our family's privacy. The scientific community took notice too. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a renowned neurologist, requested to study my case. During our first meeting, she maintained professional detachment, hooking me up to various machines to monitor my brain activity. But when I told her about her father's last moments in a hospital in Beijing, details I couldn't possibly have known, her scientific certainty cracked. "Your father wants you to know that he saw the crane," I said, drawing on the knowledge flowing through me. "The paper crane you folded for him arrived at the hospital an hour after he passed. But he saw it, and he wants you to know how much it meant to him." Dr. Chen broke down crying, later becoming one of my strongest advocates in the scientific community. Not everyone was supportive. A group of militant atheists started a website dedicated to debunking my scam. They analyzed every word I spoke, looking for inconsistencies. Some sent threatening letters, causing Dad to install security cameras around our house. But the most painful opposition came from within the religious community itself. Reverend Thomas Parker, a prominent televangelist, denounced me on his national broadcast. "This child," he declared, "is either deceived or deliberately deceiving others. God doesn't speak through children in this age. We have His complete word in Scripture." His words hurt, not because they were true, but because they came from someone who claimed to serve the same God. But for every critic, there seemed to be multiple supporters. Pastor David stood firmly by my side, helping me understand that even Jesus faced skepticism and opposition. Truth, he reminded me, often faces resistance before it brings transformation. The most powerful moments were the quiet ones, when genuine seekers came with open hearts. Like the grieving mother who discovered peace after I relayed her son's message of forgiveness. Or the atheist professor who, after speaking with me, found himself questioning his certainty about the finality of death. My school life changed dramatically. Some teachers treated me with awkward reverence, while others viewed me with obvious skepticism. My old friends didn't know how to act around me anymore. Lunch periods became lonely until Jessica Martinez, a quiet girl I barely knew, sat down beside me one day. "I believe you," she said simply. "My grandmother in Mexico has the same gift. Not exactly the same, but she sees things others don't." Jessica became my closest friend, a steady presence who neither idolized nor doubted me, but simply accepted me as I was. The pressure of being in the public eye, while trying to maintain a normal childhood, was intense. Some days I just wanted to be a regular 12-year-old again. But then I would remember Jesus' words about my mission, and I would find strength to continue. Mom worried about the toll it was taking on me. She would often find me in my room late at night, writing in my journal or praying for the souls who had sought my help that day. "You're still a child," she would say, stroking my hair. "You need to rest too." But how could I rest when I saw so much pain needing healing? How could I stay silent when I knew the truth that could set people free? Each story of healing, each moment of connection between this world and the next, confirmed that I was on the right path, despite the challenges. Little did I know that the greatest challenges were still to come, and that my growing influence would attract the attention of those who saw me as a threat to their carefully constructed worldview. The formation of the miracle deniers. I was about to take my mission from merely challenging to potentially dangerous. They called themselves the Truth Seekers, at first a seemingly innocent name for what would become a coordinated campaign against everything I represented. It started with a website, then grew into a movement led by Dr. James Henderson, a former religious studies professor who had made it his mission to expose religious fraud. The first threatening letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Mom found it in our mailbox, its words cut from magazines and newspapers: "Stop spreading lies or face the consequences." Dad wanted to go to the police immediately, but I remembered Jesus' words about loving our enemies. "They're just scared," I told him. "Fear makes people do desperate things." Dr. Henderson's group began showing up at my public appearances, holding signs that read "Miracles aren't real" and "Stop exploiting children." They would film everything I did, analyzing each word and gesture, trying to prove I was a trained performer. Their presence was intimidating, but more painful was watching how they treated the people who came seeking help. One rainy afternoon, they confronted a grieving father outside our church. The man had driven from Ohio after hearing about me, hoping to receive a message from his deceased daughter. The truth seekers surrounded him, calling him gullible and weak-minded. I watched from inside as the man broke down in tears. That night, his daughter's spirit visited me, and the message she shared proved so personal and specific that even the most hardened skeptics couldn't explain it away. The opposition grew more organized. Anonymous donors funded billboard campaigns questioning my credibility. Local businesses that supported our family began receiving threats of boycotts. Our church's website was hacked, replaced with mocking messages and distorted versions of my story. The worst came when they started targeting Sarah at her elementary school. Children of Truth Seeker members would taunt her, calling her sister a witch and a liar. Sarah would come home crying, but her faith in me never wavered. Jesus said people would hate us for telling the truth, she reminded me, showing wisdom beyond her years. Dr. Henderson's group rebranded themselves as Miracle Deniers, adopting a more aggressive stance. They claimed to be protecting society from what they called dangerous supernatural delusions. Their true agenda became clear when they began pushing for legislation to restrict religious expression by minors in public spaces. One evening, as I left choir practice, I found myself surrounded by 3 miracle deniers. Their faces were hidden behind masks bearing the group's symbol, a crossed-out halo. For the first time, I felt genuine fear. But then I saw them as Jesus had shown me to see: broken people carrying deep wounds. One man's sister had died during an attempted faith healing. Another had lost his life savings to a fraudulent televangelist. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "and so do the people you lost." The men froze as I began sharing details about their loved ones that I couldn't possibly have known. 2 ran away, but the third, Mark Stevens, fell to his knees crying. He later became one of my most vocal defenders, sharing his story of transformation with anyone who would listen. The media attention intensified. Talk shows debated my authenticity. Scientists proposed studies, some genuine in their inquiry, others clearly designed to discredit me. Through it all, I kept seeing souls, sharing messages, and witnessing healing. Each attack seemed to be met with a miracle that couldn't be explained away. Pastor David helped me understand that opposition often meant we were on the right path. Jesus didn't promise it would be easy, he said during one particularly difficult day. He promised it would be worth it. The truth of his words was proven repeatedly as lives continued to be transformed through my ministry. The Miracle Deniers' activities reached a crescendo when they announced a documentary titled "Manufacturing Miracles: The Truth" about Emma Johnson. They interviewed former classmates, offering money for negative stories. They hired private investigators to dig into our family's past. But their efforts backfired when their own investigator, Susan Torres, became a believer after witnessing me relay a message from her deceased partner. Through all this, I continued to see and help souls in need. If anything, the opposition made the genuine cases more powerful. People who came despite the Miracle Deniers' intimidation were often the ones most ready to receive healing. Their testimonies, marked by undeniable specificity and transformative power, stood in stark contrast to the critics' hollow accusations. But the Miracle Deniers weren't finished. They were about to take their opposition to a frightening new level, one that would test not just my faith, but the faith of everyone around me. Their next move would target the person I loved most, my little sister Sarah. The day Sarah disappeared started like any other. Mom was braiding her hair for school, adding the blue ribbons that were her favorite. I remember watching them in the kitchen, Sarah chattering about her upcoming art show, where she planned to display all her drawings of me surrounded by light. If only I had known what was coming, maybe I could have prevented it. The first sign something was wrong came during lunch period. I felt a sudden sharp pain in my chest, not like my previous heart problem, but a spiritual anguish that nearly knocked me over. In that moment, I knew Sarah was in danger. I rushed to the office to call Mom, but before I could reach the phone, Principal Stevens appeared with 2 police officers. Sarah had never made it to her classroom that morning. After Mom dropped her off at the elementary school entrance, she simply vanished. Security cameras showed her walking toward the building, then nothing. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Our home quickly became a command center for the search operation. Police officers came and went, detectives interviewed family members, and volunteers organized search parties. Through it all, I felt helpless. Despite my ability to see souls and receive divine messages, I couldn't seem to connect with Sarah. It was like a spiritual radio jammer was blocking our connection. Then the first message arrived, a video file sent to Dad's email. Sarah sat in a dark room, looking scared but unharmed. Behind her stood 3 figures wearing the miracle deniers' crossed-out halo masks. Their message was clear. I was to publicly denounce my experiences as lies, admit to orchestrating a hoax, or Sarah would disappear permanently. Dad wanted to give them what they wanted immediately. No truth is worth Sarah's life, he insisted, his voice breaking. But Mom, though terrified, understood something deeper. If we deny God's truth now, she said, we teach Sarah that fear is stronger than faith. I locked myself in my room that night, praying more intensely than I ever had before. Jesus, I pleaded, you showed me so many things. Please show me how to find her. The answer came not in a vision or a voice, but through an unexpected source, the souls of the departed who began appearing in my room. They came one after another, victims of past kidnappings, lost children who had never made it home, even a former miracle denier who had died recently. Each brought a piece of information, a location detail, a name, a memory. Like a spiritual puzzle, the pieces began coming together. Through their messages, I learned that Sarah was being held in an abandoned church camp 20 miles outside of town. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those who claimed to fight against false faith had chosen a former place of worship as their hideout. More importantly, I learned that one of the kidnappers was wavering in his conviction. Detective Martinez was skeptical when I shared this information. We can't launch a raid based on spiritual intel, she said diplomatically. But when I described the cabin's interior in detail, including the unique cross-shaped birthmark on one kidnapper's neck, details I couldn't possibly have known, she began to listen. The police planned their raid carefully, but I knew we had another ally. Through the souls, I learned that Sarah had been quietly sharing her own kind of truth with her captors. She had been telling them about seeing me surrounded by light, about feeling Jesus' love through my experiences. One kidnapper, a young man named Michael, had been particularly affected by her innocent faith. As the police prepared to move in, I received one final spiritual message, a warning that the other kidnappers had discovered Michael's doubts and were planning to move Sarah that night. There was no time to wait for the official raid. Through tears, I convinced Detective Martinez that we had to act immediately. What followed was a night I'll never forget. Police cars moved silently through the darkness, guided by information that came from beyond this world. Michael, true to what the souls had revealed, had already begun loosening Sarah's restraints, choosing conscience over cause. The raid itself was both chaos and miracle. As police burst in, Michael helped Sarah hide under a bench. The other kidnappers, caught off guard, barely had time to react. When it was over, Sarah ran into my arms, crying but smiling. "I knew you'd find me," she whispered. "Jesus told me to be brave, just like you." Later, we learned that Michael had once had a near-death experience himself, one he'd been afraid to acknowledge. Sarah's simple faith had awakened his buried truth. He turned state's evidence, helping prosecutors build a case against not just the kidnappers, but the larger network of extremists who had orchestrated the plot. But the ordeal wasn't over. The trial would bring new challenges, and the aftermath would reveal an even deeper family secret. Through it all, though, one truth remained clear: love and faith, when tested, often shine their brightest. The response from our community was overwhelming. Within hours of Sarah's disappearance, hundreds of people gathered at our church, organizing search parties, printing flyers, and setting up a command center. People who had once been skeptical of my experiences put aside their doubts to help find my sister. Pastor David transformed the church basement into a 24-hour prayer vigil. The space was filled constantly with people from all denominations, Catholics praying the rosary beside Baptists, Methodists joining hands with Pentecostals. Even some of our Jewish and Muslim neighbors came to offer their support and prayers. It was as if Sarah's kidnapping had broken down the walls that usually divided people of faith. Jessica Martinez's family organized the Hispanic community. Her grandmother, the one who shared my gift of sight, performed cleansing rituals and prayed in Spanish over maps of the area. Los espíritus están inquietos, she told me the spirits are restless. She sensed, as I did, that the spiritual and physical worlds were working together to find Sarah. Local businesses joined the effort. The printing shop ran flyers for free, restaurants provided food for volunteers, and the owner of the largest hotel in town offered free rooms to out-of-town law enforcement coming to help with the search. Mr. Thompson, my old math teacher who had always been skeptical of my experiences, used his computer skills to create a digital map marking every searched location. Social media exploded with support. Find Sarah trended nationally, and my story reached people who had never heard of me before. Many who read about my near-death experience and gift of sight felt compelled to help. Some drove hundreds of miles just to join the search parties. Perhaps most surprisingly, several former miracle deniers broke ranks to help. They couldn't explain why, but something about Sarah's innocence and the sincerity of our family's faith touched them. One former member, Lisa Chen, approached me privately. "I was wrong," she said, tears in her eyes. "Whatever the explanation for your gifts, using them to hurt a child is unforgivable." The local media, which had often been skeptical of my story, now became our strongest allies. Reporter Mary Anderson, who had written the first article about me, camped outside the police station, ensuring that Sarah's case stayed in the public eye. She later told me that her own daughter had appeared to her in a dream, urging her to help. Her daughter had passed away years ago, and this was the first time she'd acknowledged the possibility of spiritual communications. During the long nights of searching, I witnessed countless small miracles. Strangers became friends, old grudges were forgotten, and people who had been spiritually lost found new purpose in helping others. A group of bikers, led by a tough-looking man named Jake, turned out to be some of our most dedicated searchers. Jake later revealed that his own sister had been kidnapped decades ago and never found. This time, he said gruffly, the story ends differently. The Native American community from the nearby reservation joined the search, bringing their own spiritual traditions. Elder Joseph Running Bear performed ceremonies to connect with the land's ancient spirits. "The earth remembers," he told me. "It sees what human eyes cannot." His wisdom complemented my own spiritual insights, showing how God's truth can speak through many voices. Even nature seemed to join our cause. The unseasonably heavy rain that had been forecast, which would have hampered the search, mysteriously split around our area, as if guided by an unseen hand. Meteorologists couldn't explain it, but those of us in the prayer vigil understood. During this time, I continued receiving messages from souls, each contributing their piece to the puzzle. A deceased forest ranger showed me landmarks near the camp. A little girl who had died in the 1950s remembered playing near the abandoned church buildings. Each piece of information was carefully passed to Detective Martinez, who learned to trust these unusual sources. The solidarity shown by our community proved that love is stronger than fear, that faith can move people to extraordinary actions. It wasn't just about finding Sarah anymore, it had become about standing together against those who would use fear and hatred to silence the truth. When Sarah was finally rescued, the celebration brought our community even closer together. The church bells rang for hours, and spontaneous prayer circles formed in the streets. People who had never spoken to each other before embraced like old friends. It was a powerful reminder of what humanity can achieve when united by love and purpose. But even as we celebrated Sarah's return, I sensed that our journey wasn't over. The community's unity would soon be tested by revelations that would shake our understanding of faith, family, and forgiveness. The truth about my grandmother. Just 3 days after Sarah's rescue, while our family was still basking in the joy of her return, I saw a dark shadow hovering around Dad. At first I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just exhaustion from the recent ordeal. But during family dinner, as he reached for the salt, I saw his hand trembling slightly. The shadow darkened, and I knew this was what Jesus had warned me about. That night I heard Dad coughing in the bathroom. When I approached him the next morning, he tried to brush it off. "Just a cold, Emmy," he said with his usual reassuring smile. But I could see the truth. The shadow was now a dense cloud around his chest, and souls of cancer patients had begun appearing near him, their faces filled with sympathy. "Daddy," I said, my voice breaking, "you need to go to the doctor." "Please." He looked at me for a long moment, seeing the tears in my eyes, understanding that this wasn't just a daughter's worry, this was my gift speaking. The next day, he made the appointment. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt: stage 4 lung cancer, already spread to his lymph nodes. Mom collapsed in the doctor's office, her faith momentarily shaken. "How can God do this to us?" she sobbed. "Haven't we been through enough?" I held her hand, feeling the weight of knowing this was coming but being unable to prevent it. Sarah drew pictures of Dad surrounded by angels, just as she had once drawn me surrounded by light. She would leave them on his pillow every morning, her way of fighting the darkness that threatened to take him. Jacob, home from college, took over Dad's household duties without being asked, his way of showing love when words failed. The hardest part was watching Dad struggle with his own faith. One evening, I found him in his study staring at old family photos. "I'm not afraid of dying," he confided, "but I'm terrified of leaving you all." The souls around him shifted, and I saw my grandmother among them, her presence bringing a measure of peace. Through my gift, I began to understand that Dad's journey wasn't just about illness, it was about teaching us all how to face mortality with grace. The souls of those who had passed from cancer showed me glimpses of their final days, helping me understand how to support him. They taught me about the importance of presence over words, of gentle touches over lengthy explanations. News of Dad's illness spread through our community, and the same people who had helped search for Sarah now rallied around us again. Meals appeared on our doorstep daily. Church members organized a prayer chain that ran 24 hours a day. Even some of the former miracle deniers sent cards expressing their support. Dad started chemotherapy, and I saw how it affected both his body and his spirit. The shadows around him would darken after each treatment, but something else would shine through a light that grew stronger as his body grew weaker. He never lost his sense of humor, nicknaming his IV pole faithful friend and joking with the nurses. One particularly difficult night, as I sat with him during a fever, he shared something profound. "You know, Emmy," he whispered between shallow breaths, "I used to think your gift was about seeing death. Now I understand it's about seeing life, real life, eternal life." The souls around his bed nodded in agreement, and I realized they had been preparing me for this all along. Every message I'd delivered, every grieving person I'd comforted, had been training for walking this path with my own father. Mom found new strength in caring for Dad. She would read Bible verses to him during chemotherapy, her voice steady even when her hands shook. Their love deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible, showing me that even in darkness, light finds a way to shine brighter. But as Dad's condition worsened, I began to understand that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't about physical healing. Sometimes they're about the healing of hearts, the strengthening of faith, and the deep understanding that love transcends even death. What we didn't know then was that Dad's illness would lead to an even more profound revelation, one that would connect his suffering to my grandmother's hidden past and ultimately to the true purpose of my gift. As Dad grew weaker, I spent more time in prayer, begging Jesus for guidance. One night, while sitting beside Dad's hospital bed, I received the clearest vision since my first near-death experience. I saw that I could take on part of Dad's suffering, sharing his burden through a spiritual connection that would give him more time, but at great cost to myself. The choice was presented to me by Jesus himself, appearing not in glory this time, but in quiet compassion. "This path is not required," he told me gently. "Your Father's soul is secure in my love. But if you choose this, understand the price: you will experience death once more." I didn't hesitate. The next morning I knew what I had to do. I asked to be alone with Dad, placing my hands on his chest where the cancer was worst. The souls around his bed formed a circle, and I felt my grandmother's presence strongest among them. As I began to pray, I felt it happening, a transfer of suffering, like poison being drawn from one vessel into another. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I collapsed beside Dad's bed, my heart once again failing. The last thing I heard was Dad calling for help, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. As darkness took me, I saw the shadow of his cancer entering my own chest. This time, death was different. Instead of the golden light, I found myself in what seemed like a vast hospital ward. Souls of those who had sacrificed themselves for others surrounded me, each bearing the marks of their sacrifice. They showed me that true healing often requires someone willing to bear another's pain. For what felt like both moments and eternity, I dwelled in this place of sacrificial love. Jesus appeared again, showing me how my willing sacrifice echoed his own in a small way. But unlike me, he said with infinite tenderness, "Your sacrifice will be temporary. You will return again, carrying new understanding." When I came back this time, I found myself in the same hospital room, but everything had changed. Dad was sitting up in bed, color returned to his face. The doctors were amazed his latest scans showed the cancer had dramatically receded. They called it a miracle, not understanding the spiritual transaction that had taken place. My own recovery was slower this time. The echo of Dad's cancer left me weak, but each day as I grew stronger, I understood more about the nature of sacrificial love. The souls who visited now showed me deeper truths about healing, how it flows between people, how suffering shared becomes suffering transformed. Mom pieced together what had happened, though we never spoke of it directly. She would look at me with new understanding in her eyes, sometimes crying quietly when she thought I was asleep. Sarah drew new pictures now showing Dad and me connected by streams of light, with angels watching over both of us. The experience changed something fundamental in our family dynamic. Dad's brush with death and my second sacrifice opened us all to deeper spiritual truths. Even Jacob, who had always been the family skeptic, couldn't deny the transformation he had witnessed. But the greatest change was in how I understood my gift. It wasn't just about seeing souls or delivering messages anymore. It was about the profound connection between all souls, living and dead, healthy and sick, broken and whole. Every soul I encountered now showed me a different aspect of divine love's healing power. The story of my second sacrifice spread, adding new dimension to my ministry. People began bringing their sick loved ones to me, hoping for similar miracles. I had to help them understand that physical healing wasn't always God's plan. Sometimes the miracle was in the love shown through suffering, the strength found in weakness. As I regained my strength, I knew this second return from death had prepared me for something even more challenging. The truth about my grandmother's death was about to emerge, and it would require all the wisdom I had gained through both of my near-death experiences to help our family face it. The souls who had guided me through my sacrifice now prepared me for this next revelation, showing me how all our family struggles, Dad's cancer, Sarah's kidnapping, my deaths and returns, were connected to a deeper purpose, a divine plan that was only beginning to unfold. The revelation about my grandmother came during Dad's recovery on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was sitting in her old rocking chair, the one Mom had kept all these years, when her soul appeared more clearly than ever before. This time, she wasn't showing me the peaceful presence I'd known in heaven. Instead, she revealed the tragic truth of her final moments. "It's time they knew," she said, her voice heavy with decades of unspoken pain. The depression, the pills, the note they never found. They need to understand it wasn't their fault. Through her, I experienced the darkness she had faced, the overwhelming despair that had led her to take her own life 20 years ago. The truth shook our family to its core. What everyone had believed was a heart attack was actually a carefully planned suicide. Mom had found her that morning, but had kept the truth hidden, protecting us from what she thought was a shameful family secret. When I shared what grandmother had shown me, Mom broke down completely. I blamed myself for years, Mom sobbed, finally releasing decades of guilt. I should have seen the signs, should have done more. Grandmother's soul enveloped her in love, and through me shared memories. Mom had forgotten happy moments that showed her love had never been lacking. That depression had been an illness as real as Dad's cancer. The revelation rippled through our extended family. Aunt Claire, Mom's sister, finally spoke about her own battles with depression, how she'd feared the same darkness that had taken their mother. Cousins I barely knew called, sharing stories of their own mental health struggles, all of them carrying the weight of a silence that had spanned generations. Grandmother showed me how her death had started a cycle of hidden pain in our family. Dad's stoic acceptance of his cancer, Mom's desperate need to protect us from harm, even my own drive to sacrifice myself, all were echoes of her unresolved story. But now, through my gift, she could finally help break this cycle. The most powerful moment came when grandmother's soul led me to the place where she had hidden her final letter. Behind a loose brick in the old fireplace, preserved in a plastic bag, we found her last words of love, of apology, of hope that her family would someday understand. The letter confirmed everything I had shared, bringing both pain and healing to our family. This truth changed how we approached mental health in our family. Mom started a support group at church, breaking the silence around depression and suicide in our religious community. Pastor David, inspired by our story, began including mental health in his sermons, speaking about how God's love extends even to those in their darkest moments. Grandmother's revelation transformed my understanding of my gift as well. It wasn't just about connecting with souls or sharing messages, it was about healing generational wounds, bringing light to the darkest corners of human experience. Through her story, she was helping countless others face their own hidden pain. Sarah, with her simple wisdom, drew a new picture of our family tree with golden light flowing through all its branches, even the broken ones. See, she said, grandmother's in heaven now, but she's still helping us grow. Her childlike understanding captured perfectly what we all needed to learn, that healing comes not from hiding our wounds, but from allowing God's light to shine through them. Dr. James Henderson, leader of the Miracle Deniers, arrived at our house unannounced one rainy evening. His face, usually hard with skepticism, was haunted. Through my gift, I could see he was surrounded by restless souls, including one that made my heart ache, a young woman who shared his features. "My daughter Rachel," he said, his voice breaking. "You saw her, didn't you?" That day at the protest, I nodded, remembering how Rachel's soul had appeared during one of his most vicious attacks against me, trying desperately to reach her father. The truth poured out of him. Rachel had died by suicide 10 years ago after a battle with depression that paralleled my grandmother's. Dr. Henderson had been a religious man then, a pastor who had preached against mental illness as a spiritual weakness. His daughter had hidden her suffering, believing her faith wasn't strong enough. "After losing her, I lost my faith," he confessed. "I convinced myself that if I could disprove all supernatural claims, somehow it would justify my failure as both a father and a minister." Tears streamed down his face as Rachel's soul embraced him, though he couldn't feel it physically. Through me, Rachel spoke to her father. She shared memories only they would know, the secret pizza parties they'd have when her mom was working late, the butterfly garden they'd planted together, the last birthday card she'd hidden in his Bible that he'd never found. "She forgives you," I said softly. "She wants you to know that her death wasn't about lack of faith. Depression is an illness, like Dad's cancer. It doesn't discriminate between believers and non-believers." Dr. Henderson broke down completely, decades of guilt and anger crumbling away. Sarah, who had been listening from the stairs, came down and took his hand. "It's okay," she said. "Jesus still loves you. And Rachel does too." The transformation in Dr. Henderson was profound. The next day, he publicly disbanded the Miracle Deniers, sharing his story with the same passion he had once used to attack us. Many members, touched by his honesty, came forward with their own stories of loss and grief. He became an advocate for mental health awareness in religious communities, using his academic background to bridge the gap between faith and mental health care. The man who had once tried to destroy my ministry now worked to expand its healing reach. Rachel's soul remained close to her father as he began his journey of healing. Through my gift, I could see her joy as he gradually reclaimed his faith, not in the rigid form of his past, but in a deeper understanding of God's love that embraced both the mysteries of heaven and the struggles of earth. The greatest testament to his transformation came during a joint presentation we gave at a mental health conference. Dr. Henderson stood before hundreds of people and declared, "I set out to disprove miracles, only to become part of one. Through the gift of this child, God showed me that true faith isn't about denying our wounds, but about allowing them to become channels for healing others." His story became a powerful witness to the very truth he had once fought against, that God's love can reach into the darkest places of human experience, bringing light and healing in unexpected ways. The former antagonist had become one of the strongest validators of my ministry, showing that even the hardest hearts can be transformed by love. Our family's healing began to take shape like a beautiful tapestry, each thread of pain and love weaving together into something more beautiful than we could have imagined. Dad's cancer went into full remission, a medical miracle the doctors couldn't explain, but our family understood as the fruit of sacrificial love. The transformation started at home. Mom's support group for families affected by mental health issues and suicide grew beyond our church, touching lives across the community. She finally found peace with her mother's death, channeling her grief into helping others. The shadows that had haunted her eyes for decades lifted, replaced by a gentle wisdom born of suffering transformed into purpose. Sarah blossomed in unexpected ways. Her art, once focused solely on spiritual visions, expanded to include scenes of healing and hope. She began visiting children's hospitals, sharing her drawings and stories about angels. Her simple faith, tested but unbroken by her kidnapping, touched hearts that more sophisticated arguments couldn't reach. Jacob came home from college permanently, having discovered his own calling through our family's journey. He combined his business degree with a new passion for mental health advocacy, creating a foundation that helped families afford counseling and treatment. The skeptical brother who had once rolled his eyes at my gift now worked alongside me, bridging the practical and spiritual aspects of healing. Our house became a gathering place for healing. The living room where we had once huddled in fear during Sarah's kidnapping now hosted weekly meetings where people shared their stories of loss, hope, and recovery. The kitchen where Mom had hidden her grief for years now buzzed with laughter as families cooked and ate together, finding community in their shared journeys. Even the miracle deniers who had once threatened us found healing. Led by Dr. Henderson's example, many became regular visitors. Their skepticism transformed into a different kind of faith, one that embraced mystery while acknowledging pain. Michael, the kidnapper who had helped save Sarah, was released from prison and joined our ministry, his story of redemption touching countless lives. The souls who visited now brought messages not just from the deceased, but from a place of deep healing. They showed me how heaven's perspective sees our wounds not as failures, but as places where God's light can shine through most brightly. My grandmother's spirit remained a constant presence, her story of hidden pain now bringing hope to others facing similar struggles. One particularly meaningful evening, we held a special service at church. Former miracle deniers sat beside lifelong believers. Families touched by suicide held hands with those who had judged them in the past. Dad, strong enough to stand again, shared his story of physical and spiritual healing. Mom spoke about breaking the silence around mental health, and Sarah's artwork lined the walls, each piece telling part of our family's journey. During that service, I saw something remarkable: souls of those who had died by suicide, including my grandmother and Rachel Henderson, gathered around their living loved ones. Through my gift, I could see chains of pain and shame breaking, replaced by cords of love and understanding that stretched between heaven and earth. Pastor David, who had walked with us through every step of our journey, summed it up perfectly. This family story reminds us that God doesn't waste our wounds. Every broken place can become a source of healing for others when we bring it into His light. That night marked a new chapter for our family, but it wasn't the end of our story. There was still one final message to be shared, one that would reach far beyond our small town to touch hearts around the world. The impact of our family's story spread far beyond what we could have imagined. It began with a documentary, not the expose the miracle deniers had planned, but a thoughtful exploration of faith, healing, and the power of love to transform lives. The film captured everything: the raw pain of Sarah's kidnapping, Dad's battle with cancer, the revelation of my grandmother's suicide, and the healing that followed. When the documentary aired, something extraordinary happened. People from around the world began reaching out, sharing their own stories of hidden pain and unexpected healing. Letters poured in from every continent, each one a testament to how our family's journey had given others the courage to face their own darkness. A group of Japanese suicide survivors created a healing center inspired by our story, combining traditional spiritual practices with mental health support. In Brazil, churches began incorporating mental health ministry alongside physical healing services. European medical centers started studying the connection between spiritual and emotional healing, using our family's experience as a case study. My gift evolved too. While I still saw and communicated with souls, the message became broader, deeper. It wasn't just about delivering messages from the deceased anymore, but about helping people understand the profound connection between heaven and earth, between pain and healing, between love and redemption. Sarah's artwork found its way into hospitals and healing centers worldwide. Her simple, powerful images of light breaking through darkness spoke a universal language of hope. She began receiving commissions for healing spaces, her childlike faith touching hearts across cultural and religious boundaries. The foundation Jacob established expanded internationally, creating a network of support for families dealing with mental health crises and loss. Dr. Henderson joined the board, bringing his academic expertise and personal testimony to strengthen the bridge between faith and mental health care. But perhaps the most profound impact came through the quiet transformations in individual lives. A teenage girl in Australia found courage to tell her parents about her depression. A pastor in Kenya started talking openly about his family's history of mental illness. A grieving father in Canada finally forgave himself for his son's suicide. During a global conference on faith and healing, I shared what Jesus had shown me during my near-death experiences, that love is the force that bridges all divides, heals all wounds, and transforms all darkness. The message resonated across religious and cultural boundaries, touching hearts in ways I never could have orchestrated. Mom's support group model was adopted by communities around the world, creating safe spaces where people could bring their whole selves, their faith, their doubts, their pain, and their hope. The silence around mental health in religious communities began to break, replaced by voices of compassion and understanding. As I watch our story continue to unfold, I'm reminded of what Jesus told me during my first heavenly encounter, that love is the answer to every question, the solution to every problem, the light in every darkness. Our family's journey has proved this truth in ways we never expected. The souls who visit now often bring messages not just for individuals, but for humanity as a whole. They show me how each person's healing contributes to the healing of the world, how each act of love creates ripples that touch distant shores. Our small town has become a place of pilgrimage, not because of my gift alone, but because of what God has done through our family's broken places. As Sarah says in her simple wisdom, sometimes God has to break our hearts so His love can get in better. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective and experiences matter to our community. Support our team's mission of sharing these powerful stories by subscribing to our channel and clicking the like button. Help spread hope and inspiration by sharing this video with your friends and family. Together we can create a ripple effect of healing and understanding. Your support enables us to continue bringing these meaningful stories to light. Thank you for being part of this journey of faith, love, and transformation.